Okay, good morning. How are we doing today? And then Aleph, and Mitzvah will finish the pack. Aleph and base. We are up to now the two dots. Tanar Rabbanan, the top of the page, about 10 lines down. Tanar Rabbanan. Sounds like you pronounce the next word asparagus, but I'm not talking about asparagus, the food that we have. At least I don't think so. So Tanar Rabbanan, the rabbi said asparagus, Yaflu Leva Tayv Le'naim, V'chol Sheken L'Bnei Me'ayim. This asparagus, Rashi says, is a kosher who says to Michal Biker. They would drink this in the morning. Aliba Rekana on an empty heart. The refuah, it was some sort of medicinal drink that would make them feel good. So we said it's good for the heart, it's good for the eyes, and it's good for the intestines. If you have it normatively, then it's great for your whole body. But if you have a ton of it, then it's bad for you. Now, just to mention, notice that formulation, Yafalalev, V'toiv le'inayim, V'chol shken l'bnei me'ayim. We already had that, right? Remember? Where do we have that? We had that on Lamates, by the tafshil or shal trading, right? The trading, which is made of beets. Also, it said over there, Yafa, le'inayim. Sorry, Yafalalev, Toiv le'inayim, V'chol shken l'bnei me'ayim. Similar. But I'm not sure about the next line, if the next line is going to be comparable in the trade in case or not. Because the next line thing more says is Midiktani Yafalev Michlal de Becham Raskinon. From the fact that you tell me it's good for the heart, that tells me that we're dealing with wine. I guess in order to make something really good for the heart, it has to have some wine in there. Uktani, and we learn Bechol Shekei Lebnei Me'ayim. And you said that it's not just good for the heart and the eyes, but Kolshkein, it's good for the intestines. But the Gemara says, I don't understand that. That is a problem in terms of their understanding of health. Why? The Tanya, what we learned in a Brisa, Lelait Yafa Leramat Kasha. This is it, acronyms. What is light? Rashi says, light is Lamed Ayin Tes, Lev Ayin Tchel. Tchel is the spleen. And Ramat is Rosh Me'ayim Tachtonius. Tachtonius is like hemorrhoids, meaning that we have a brisa that says that the asparagus drink that they used to have was liyafa for light. It was good for what? The lev einayim and tchel. But leramat, to the rosh me'ayim and tachtonius, it was bad. So we used to from this brisa that it's not good for the bnei me'ayim. You see, it's bad. So how could you say that the kol shekei lebnei me'ayim, that it's good, but you see from this brisa that it's bad for the bnei me'ayim? Now the Gemara answers, Kitanya b'miyushan. We're talking over here about old wine, not newer wine. What do we mean? Because it's not like we have in a Mishnah. The Mishnah tells us like this: Kainam yain shani tayim. If somebody says, "Look, I would like to aser up on myself. I want to make it like hektish. This wine that I taste. Why? Shayain kashlo b'nei me'am. Because he says, I don't want to have wine. I want this wine to be aser to me like hektish. Why? Because it's bad for you. It's bad for your intestines. So Amrulai, and then people say to this guy, but don't we know that old wine is really good for your intestines? Vishasan, and this person is quiet. Then Asr b'chadash umutter b'miyoshan. And this person would, even though he said kainem yain shani tayim, even though he said kainem yain that he wants to make a wine asr to him, but because he gave a reason, namely he said kainem yain shani tayim yain kasher l'bnei me'ayim, that means he really only wants to asr up on himself wine that is bad for his insides. But old wine, which in their understanding was good for the insides, then that's going to be mutter. Because he himself is giving a reason. So in that situation, so then it would only be Aser in Yain Chodash, but it would be Mutter in Yain Yashin. What does that mean? For our intents and purposes, Shema Mina, that this price that you're asking about, which is saying that it's bad l'ramat, which includes the b'nei me'ayim, that must be talking about new wine. That must not be talking about old wine, because old wine is going to be good for the b'nei me'ayim. So again, is that clear? The Gemara tells us that the asparagus is yafel einayim, the lave, and even for the Gemara even says the kol shkein for the b'nei me'ayim. And then we're coming up practically that that's talking about in a situation of yain yashan, but yain chadash would be only good for the lave and the einayim, but it would be bad for the b'nei me'ayim. Good. Continues the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan. The rabbis taught shisha devarim namru asparagus. Right, this kind of drink, they said 6 things about it. I'm not sure how you count the 6 things 100% because look at the line and you'll see more than 6. Ein shaisin kishu chai. Right, you can only drink this asparagus drink sort of when it's chai, when it's undiluted. Umale, right, it has to be from a full cup. Mekabloi biyamin, you got to take it with your right hand. V'shaiseu b'smile, and drink it with your left hand. Right, so you take it here with your right, and move it to your left. Ve'en masicha acharav, and you don't speak afterwards. Ve'en mafsikin by, and you don't interrupt the drink. You gotta do it, in one time. Ve'en machzirin oisai elul misha nais nalai, and you don't return it except for the person that gave it to you. V'roik acharav, and you have to spit afterwards. Ve'en seimchen oisai elul b'minai, and you don't eat after unless something that came from it itself. In other words, what is it itself made of? As we'll see, whatever it's made of, that's what you are able to eat afterwards. So how many things is this? The Ein Shaisin Asel Kishu Chai, Umala, and the Kabbalah Bimin, Shaseo Bismo, Masichan Acharov, Ein Mafsikin Lev, Ein Mafsirin Asel, Mishan Asel, Lev, Varoik Acharov, Ein Simchan Asel, Bimina. I count 9 things. So obviously, you have to put a couple of these together in order to make it 6. Okay. But what's clear is that the Brisa said that when you have the asparagus drink and you're eating afterwards, you have to eat from the same min that this drink was made out of. You can't have a different food. It has to be the same kind of food. It says the Gemara, what do you mean? Well, Tanya, we have another Brisa that says, Ein b'pas, that the only thing you're allowed to have to drink after the asparagus is bread, which is not what this is made out of. So how could it be? It doesn't sound like it's fitting with this Brisa that you just quoted. So the Gemara says like kasha. It's not a stira. There's 2 types of this asparagus drink that's medicinal benefits that they drank in the morning. One was made out of wine, and one was made out of beer. So when it's made out of wine and when it's made out of beer is going to have different implications. Rashi explains, if it was asparagus drink was made out of wine, so then you could have pas afterwards. But if it was made out of shichra, says Rashi, then smichas b'minai. Then the only thing you could have after drinking the asparagus drink is whatever it was made out of, namely im shechar ta'enim. Right? If it was the kind of beer that was made out of figs, then simcha b'ta'enim. Im shel tamarim hu simcha b'tamarim. But if it was made of date beer, then you could have some dates afterwards. That is to say, this brisa that told us that you can only have after you drink the asparagus, only something from that min, that is only talking about the situation of what? That is only talking about a situation where you have the asparagus drink, which is based on beer. But if the asparagus drink is based on wine, then you could have bread afterwards. That's the way the Gemara answers up the stira. So So far, we've had two cases of the asparagus drink. One where it's made out of yain yashan, and now in this case where it's made out of shechar. Good. Now we have another stira in Brises. The Gemara says, Tani chada lelayit yafa leramat kasha. We have one Brise that says that this asparagus drink is good light, right? It's good for the lave, ayin, and chayil, and it's bad for the rosh me'ayim and tachtanias. The tiny idach, we have another Brise that says the opposite, leramat yafa lelayit kasha. We have another Bryce that says, great, this asparagus is great for what? For the Rosh Me'ayim and Tachtanias, but it's bad for the Leve Naim and Tchel. So again, a stira, what do you do between the two prices? So the Gemara says, like kasha, it's not a stira. Habedechamra, habedeshechra. It's not a stira. One's a situation of wine, and one's a situation of beer. That is to say, says Rashi, sorry, no Rashi. When we say that we're talking about either cham or shechor, what do we mean? So we mean like this, that if it's a situation where we're saying it's yafa l'layit, it's good for the leve naim and chayil, right? What is that situation must be? That must be talking about wine. And in that situation, it's bad for the minute me'ayim. Because in the first case that we learned about yain yashan, that's what we said for kol sheken lebnei me'ayim. That's what we said, that this asparagus drink is yafa l'leiv einayim and kol sheken lebnei me'ayim. That's only by yain miyoshan. Right? What did the Gemara say? The Gemara said, what do you mean? How could it be good for the bnei me'ayim? Didn't we learn v'atanya l'layim yafa l'ramat kasha? The Gemara says, no, there's a difference between yain Yashan and Yain Chadash. So by Yain Yashan, we said it's good for the Leve Naim and even B'nei Me'ayim, or for sure B'nei Me'ayim. But normal wine, regular wine, then it's only going to be Yafalai, it's only going to be good for the Leve Naim and Chayil, but it's going to be bad for the Rosh Me'ayim and Tachtanias. So the Gemara is over here saying we have a brisa that says, L'laid Yafal or Mat Kasha, that's talking about regular Chamra. That's talking about regular wine, not yain yashan. Regular wine is going to be good for the leiv and the nine, but it's going to be bad for the bnei me'ayim. And what about the other brisa that says that it's bad for layit, but it's yaf for the rosh me'ayim and tachton? Yes, that is the asparagus drink that's made out of beer. So the one that's made out of beer is good for the rosh me'ayim and tachton, yes, but it's bad for the layit. So again, Lakash is Mahab the Chamar with the Shecha. Another steer in Brises, Tanicha the Roik Achar of Leica. We have one Brise that says that if you spit after drinking it, then you're going to get Malchus. Remember, that was one of the things that we said that you had to do for Roik Achar, you had to do it. And here we're saying in a Brise that if you spit, you're going to get Malchus. The tiny Yidach Loi Roik Achar of Leica. And the other Brise says that if you don't spit out afterwards, then you're going to get Malchus. Again, says the Gemara, like Kasha, but the Chamra, but the Shechra. Again, the Nafkamid is whether it's Sama Chamra or Shechra. So, bid the Chamra, says Rashi, Lo Yarek, then you don't have to spit. But with the Shechra, if you don't spit, Im Lo Yarek, Mayim Abon Befif Achrav Loik, then if you don't spit, you're going to get Malchus. So remember, we ended up saying that the 6 things that you say by the asparagus, that was Tamar Shechra. Right, because we said, which meant that was only dealing with shechor, whether it's date beer or fig beer, whichever. So when we say in that very price, we say for roy gachav, and you have to spit, because when it comes to the beer asparagus, you must spit. But when we say you don't have to spit, then that is talking about the asparagus drink that's made out of wine. Right, so that one you don't spit. Good. So that is explaining all the different permutations of Bryces about this kind of a drink that they used to drink in the mornings for medicinal benefits. Rav Ashi, so Rav Ashi concludes this topic of the asparagus drink, says like this: Hashto de Amris, loy roik achor, like in the situation where you say that if you don't spit, you're going to get malchus. In other words, when the asparagus drink is made out of beer, whether date or fig beer, over there you must spit out afterwards. So then, Meimav Nizrakin Afilu B'fnei Melech, then you have to spit even before the king, right? Because as Rashi says, Yarek al Yistaki, you're going to put yourself in sakana if you don't spit. Again, hard to know exactly what this drink was or why it was so valuable for them. And they used to have it every morning and have all these things that they said about it. I'm just shocked that if they drank it in the morning, like who said there was always somebody there to give it to them? I don't know what kind of mornings they had. Maybe these are only wealthy people who had servants ready to give them this drink. Who's making the drink for them? Was it ready in the morning before they woke up? I don't know. Maybe it would last it from yesterday. I'm not sure. All right. Now we get to another Gemara. It still has some connections to the asparagus, but nevertheless a new Gemara. Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha. Right. When was the last time we had Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha? You remember the Gemara? We had it on Brachot Zayin. Right. The Gemara said it became a song, famous song from Avram Fried. You'll see why that became a famous song and this didn't become a famous song. So Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha said, Shlosha Dvar Sachli Suriel Sar HaPanim. In the Gemara Brachos Zayin, he met Akasrika Kashem Tzavakos. Shil Yoshev, right? Whatever that meant. Here he met somebody who was the minister of the interior, and his name was Suriel. Rashi tells us who's Suriel? Malach Chashav. He's a very, very important angel. Lava Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he used to come and appear before the Rebbeinu Shalom. So Shmuel ben Elisha, he used to take trips upstairs to do various things. One time we know very sadly, I mentioned on Shabbos, the what do you call that? We say in the both in Tisha B'av and on Yom Kippur, which is that they want to go upstairs to find out if this gezer was from Shemayim about that Sarah Malchus. But for our purposes now, this is Suriel, the Sarah Panim, who told him three things. Rashi over here quotes, where does this come from? Rashi says, Rabbi Shmuel, al rakia al yidei shem. Rabbi Shmuel went up to heaven using the divine name. The Brisa, the Maisa Merkava. This is coming from the Brisa of Maisa Merkava. This is an old Kabbalistic type of midrashic statement that Rashi had access to. It was known as the Brisa of Maisa Merkava. And over there it has discussions between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva and how they used to do various aliyahs. And this is one of them. So what happened on the trip upstairs? So the Sarfin told him, "Al titol chalukecha b'shachris miyad hashamish b'til mesh." Don't take your shirt from your servant and get dressed. Says Rashi, what should you do instead? You should get it yourself from the hook and put it on. Okay. And don't take the cup to wash your hands from Netilas Yadayim from somebody who has not yet washed their own hands from Netilas Yadayim. And then, of course, why this is relevant to us. Asparagus and you shouldn't take the Valtaxicus asparagus. You shouldn't return this drink, except for the person that has given it to you, because of taxpis, which is some sort of a shade. Shema chaburis shadim. So some sort of a name, says Rashi, of demons, and therefore you don't want to give it back except for the person who gave it to you, because you never know. The Amrila and others say no, it doesn't mean tax piss, but rather estagliness. Shamalachei Chavala. It's a group of Malachei Chavala, bad angels, and therefore you don't give it back except for the person that gave it to you, because either the demons or the Malachei Chavala are mitzapen leil adam. They're waiting for a person. They're saying, when is a person like, dancing, the waiting in glee? When is a person going to make a mistake and going to give the kais asparagus, to one of us, or to, to not give it back to the person who gave it to them? Maybe not necessarily one of them, but to give it to somebody else, maybe invites their wrath, or is going to take their shirt from somebody and not put it on himself, or he's going to take Ntiasadai, Vaser, Nagel Vaser from somebody who didn't wash Nagel Vaser yet. And in all these situations, you're going to catch him and you're going to get him into trouble. Now you can understand why they didn't make this into the song, yes? Yes. Okay. Now, that's point number one. And that takes us now away from our asparagus. Now we're really done with it, okay? So now we have another story about esoteric matters. Rabbi Shimon Levi, Shlosh Dvarim Sachli Malach HaMavos. Rabbi Shimon Levi says that the Malach HaMavos taught him three things. Now, you may or may not remember, there's a Gemara in Ksubas Zayin Zayin. The Gemara tells us that Rabbi Shimon Levi was going to die. Rabbi Shimon Levi, he got to know, he got to know the Malach HaMavos, he was going to die. So the Gemara says that Hashem said to the Malach HaMavos, look, he's going to die, but he's, he's a great knacker. He's done some real good stuff in his life. You first got to go consult with him, about his dying. He doesn't just die. So the Malach HaMavos comes out to Rabbi Shimon Levi, and they get into a conversation. He says, listen, before I die, I want to first see my place in heaven. Malach HaMavos is a trusting guy. He said, okay. Rabbi Shimon Levi says, look, but I'm nervous going around with you, and you're kind of swirly, scary sword. Gets me nervous. Let me hold it. Malach was like, okay, sure, no problem. And like that, they go and jump into Gan Eden. And over there, the Gemara says the story of Shimon Levi meets Reb Shimon Yochai, Hol Maisa. Anyhow, Reb Shimon Levi decides he's not giving him back the sword. So Hashem says, you got to give him back the sword. That's not how this works. He needs to go do his job. He has a job. You got to give him back the sword. That's how the Gemara over there says, ends. I always find the Gemara very funny. We're coming after Pesach. You have the Gemara Pesachim, and the Gemara tells us that Rabbi Shimon Levi had a son who became deathly ill, and he was hovering between life and death. And he had what's known as one of these near-death experiences. And then when he comes to, Rabbi Shimon Levi says to him, what did you see over there? He says, so upside down world. The people are take down in this world. Upstairs, not so much. And the vice versa. Those are major players upstairs. Down here, they're not really so major players. So Rabbi Shimon was like, wow, that's really interesting. Obviously, that story had to be before he went up to Gan Eden, because he would have seen there how things were upstairs. But in any event, it's the context for us to understand the Gemara over here. Rabbi Shimon Levi is telling us three things that the Malach HaMavos taught him. But when did this take place? Did this take place in the time of the story of the Mark Ksubas Zayin Zayin, which is the end of his life, and now he's learning about these various things? Or did he have other previous conversations that we don't know about the Malach HaMavos? It could be his other conversations, not sure. It says, but what are the three things that the Malach HaMavos taught him? Al Tito Chalukha Shachas Miana Shamish. Right? He said, the same thing as the Sarpanim, right? Surreal Sarpanim said, don't take your shirt from the Shamish and get dressed. And don't take the Negelvas of water from somebody who hasn't yet washed. So these two things are what? The same as Surreal Sarpanim. So it's good, the angels, let's say, singing from the same songbook, the same hymn sheet, Baruch Hashem, right? At least that means less things to worry about, right? What's the last thing that he says? The third thing is different than Surreal Sarpanim. Surreal Sarpanim was talking about asparagus, but Malach HaMavos tells him something else. Don't stand in front of the woman. Don't walk by the woman when they're returning back from a funeral. Why? Because I am dancing in front of them. Marsha says, why? Why does he get a chance to dance in front of the woman after a funeral? Because the women are considered the ones who have brought death to the world, given what Chava did. And so therefore, he's hanging out with the woman after a funeral. And says the Malach Amos, and my sword is in my hand. I have the ability to hurt people. Says the Gemara, so what happens if you meet women after a funeral? Right? What do you do? Says more lynch of me duchte arba amis. Try to like jump away for amis. If there's a river, you should try to cross it. And if there's another path, take it. And if there's a wall, jump behind it. And if there's no options, and the women are walking by you after the funeral, turn your head, and you should say a pasuk. Pasuk in Zachar we have as part of Haftarah. Hashem al Satan, Yigar Hashem v'cha Satan, ad l'chol minute. And you should quote that pasuk that Hashem says, that He's said at the Satan, and you should keep on saying that until they pass in front of you. So these are the three things that Rabbi Shua ben Levi learned from the Malach Amos. And the three things that we learned from Shmuel ben Elisha, from Suriel Sar Panim. As we see, two of these are the same in each, and the third is different. So in the end, we end up with four different things that we learned, right? How much is one supposed to be worried about the Shaitan and the demons and all this? I mentioned before, I think. The Gemara Pesachim good. Basically, the idea is the more you're worried about them, the more you have what to be worried about. The less you're worried about them, the less you have to be worried about. The Gemara's lashon there is somebody who's covered by his captain and bow, right? If they're worried about them, they'll be worried about you. If you're not worried about them, they'll not be worried about you. As to the larger sugya, whether or not there are malachei chavalam, whether or not there are shadim, whether the Rambam Paskin shadim out of existence by saying that there's no such thing. These are not our topic for now, and we won't go further. All right, now we're at the two dots. The Gemara says, now Amar Rav Zera, Amar Rav Avo, Amar Rav Masnisa, Tana Asar Dvar Nemar B'Kei Bracha. So Rav Zera says, in the name of Rav Avo, that maybe some say it's from a brisa, that we say 10 things about a Kei Bracha. 10 things. What are the 10 things? And we're going to explain all of them soon. Tan Nadacha Shdiva needs rinsing. Chai, it has to be undiluted. Male has to be full. Itav, it has to be sort of crowned. It has to be adorned. It has to be a min. You have to take it in two hands and put it into one, into your right. You have to lift it up from the ground, the tafach. The nice and einav, you have to look inside it. There are those that say, "Af mishigrei b'matanol anshe beisai." Those that say that you even have to give it to anshe beisai. Rashi says that means your wife. Rabbi Yochanan says we don't have these 10 things. We only have 4 of these things, which are right? Washing, rinsing, undiluted, and male, and it has to be full. Now we'll explain a little bit. So we learned rinsing. When you rinse on the outside, it's called shtifa. When you rinse on the inside of a cup, it's called hadacha. But it's rinsing the cup. When we say that you have to do hadacha and shtifa, you have to sort of wash it out. That was in the 10 list, and that's in the 4 list of Rabbi Yochanan. In other words, everyone agrees that the cup, the Kreshel Brachot used for benching, has to be a clean cup. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol HaMavarech, Al Kois Malei, Noisin Lo Nachla B'li Mitzar. Anyone who makes a bracha on a cup, anyone who's making a benching on a Kois Malei, Kois Shel Bracha, that is full, Nice and like nachala b'lim. We give them an inheritance without any boundaries. The same way they had a full cup, they get a full inheritance. Shneimar, Umali Birkas Hayam Yom V'dar Mirasha. Like the pasuk says there, V'zayis HaBracha, Umali Birkas Hashem, right? It should be full. Yom V'dar Mirasha. His inheritance will be in the west and the south. In other words, we're making a play on the words. Umali Birkas Hashem. You have a full cup of the bracha for Hashem. You have a full cup of wine for benching. So then you'll have a full inheritance. From Yosef Rabbi Chanina, you're going to have a schus to have an inheritance of two worlds, Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba. You can inherit two worlds. If you have a Kais Malay, at a Kais Shel Bracha, you get two worlds, one Olam Hazeh, one Olam Haba. So that now explains Hadacha and Shtifa, and the next one about Malay. Right, we didn't yet explain about Chai. We'll come back to that. Now the Gemara takes a pause to talk about Itur, this idea of adorning and it making itself nice. What does it mean, Itur? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda Matrei b'Talmidim. Rabbi Yehuda, when he would bench, he would adorn the Kreis Shel Bracha by having a lot of Talmidim sit around him. Rav Chizda ma'atele b'netile. Rav Chizda would ma'atev their kais with many other kaises. In other words, he wouldn't just have one cup. He was benching on one cup, but he would pour a lot of other cups of wine. That was a way of adorning the Kreis Shel Bracha with other cups of wine that are there, that you're going to, show how important this is. Amr Chanan says, Ubechai. We're talking about that the wine has to be not just a lot of cups, but undiluted. Amr Sheshes, Ubeberchas Haaretz. And so we're adding, not just it has to be a lot of cups, but it has to be undiluted cups. And Rav Sheshes says, Ubeberchas Haaretz. When you get to the bracha of Naidelacha, you should add to it. So it sounds like what we're saying in terms of the Itur, that either you matre b'talmidim or you're ma'ate with other kaises. So what kind of kaises? Undiluted kaises. And by the Birchas Haaretz is when you make the additions of all these kaises. That's what it sounds like from the Gemara over here. We have to do a couple more lines before we go back. Itov. What is itov? That you're going to enwrap yourself. Rav Papa ma'ate fi Yosef. Rav Papa would, put on his jacket. Rav Asi par sudra al reisha. Rav Asi would put his hat. So that's how you get, the Mishnah Berurah writes there. Kuf Pei Gimel. Person should put his hat and jacket for benching. That's from here. Noit lebishnei yadav. You take it in two hands. Amar Rav Chanina bar Papa. My cross suidechem kodesh. That means the pasuk. The pasuk says you should lift up your hands to bless God. So since you're lifting up your hands, lift up your hands to pick up the cup of betzah. You notice when they do the Brachot Hamazon, people know what they're doing. They pick up the cup with two hands to give it to the one who's going to bench, who takes it with one hand. Nicely, and then you put it in your right hand. Smell ma'u. They asked, what about using your left? Are you able to use the left to help the right if the right gets tired? The bottom thesis says, maybe we're talking about a situation of Rosh Chodesh Teves on Shabbos, which is, Hanukkah, or maybe by a wedding, it's for a long Berachos Hamazon. So maybe in that situation, your right hand is tired. So you want to know if your left hand can help? This is a very critical line, because the Rabbi Chibur Abba is quoting Rabbi Yochanan to say, is the left hand allowed to help out the right? But Rabbi Yochanan said, if you remember, there are only four things. Hadacha, Shtifa, Chai, and Malay. Rabbi Yochanan says there's only four things. He doesn't mention the idea of taking in the right hand. That's one of the 10. Right? That one of the 10 things that we said was nice to be a min. Nice to be a min. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold to that. So Taisus points out from here, the Taisus Vein Lanu Ela Arba Dvarim, the Taisus points out that Umiulay Mashma, the polyg Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan doesn't really hold that there's only four things, because later on the Gemara says, Rabbi Yechanan says, Rishonim Shal, they asked, the Rishonim asks, what about Shetaseo Smoli Min? Mashma Shekena Yunayagim. So you see that they were okay with the idea of having the other 10 things, because he asked about the left helping out the right. That means he holds of more than the four things. So therefore, says Taisus, Rabbi Yochanan doesn't disagree. And therefore, if you look in Arachai, if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, you'll see that we go with all the 10 things. We don't just mention the four Rabbi Yochanan, because in fact, Rabbi Yochanan himself held to the 10 things. The one thing that has to be bothering you, right, is, what do you mean undiluted? We literally had all these Gemaras that undiluted, maybe you should make an 8. Undiluted, you can't make a bracha for. So what do you mean undiluted? Undiluted is why they're not supposed to use. That's the Taisus. We didn't do one Taisus. No, base. Taisus and Baitim Chachamim. Taisus now makes sense what Taisus asks. Taisus says that the Chachamim Baitim Rabbi Lezer. We had an opinion from Rabbi Shimon said that. Sorry, not Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yisrael Rechina said Baitim Chachamim Rabbi Lezer because Shal Bracha Shem of Archim Love Achitin Lechamayim, that the Chachamim agreed with Rabbi Lezer that you can't make a bracha on a kosher bracha if it's undiluted. Taisus Tema. That real common dalad from them kosher bracha. One of them was Chayim Malay. Rabbi Yochanan says not only the 10 that says undiluted. Rabbi Yochanan says 4. One of them is undiluted. Means really undiluted. It's what you're supposed to use. You can't even make a bracha on that. The Taisus struggles to try to come up with an answer what it means. If you look at Rashi over here, Rashi, and he says Chai. Rashi says Shemois gave a mayim la'achashanas because Chai. Rashi says that you have to pour it undiluted, and then you will add in water afterwards, because you can't obviously make a bracha on it. So Rashi is trying to differentiate what it means Chai. And Taisus, one of his answers fits with this Rashi, which is he has to go into the kosher bracha Chai. It has to go in undiluted, not diluted wine, undiluted. And then you dilute it a little bit in the kosher bracha once it's already there. That's what it means. It has to go in. Kosher Chai. This is the approach of one of the answers of Taisus and how Rashi explains over here as well. Okay, continues the Gemara. So Amar Rav Ashi the rabbis, the early rabbis had a question what it means using the left hand to help the right, but they didn't have an answer. But if Shalu was to turn the page to Nun Aleph of the basis, they didn't have a good answer. We're going to go l'chumra. And we're not going to help out the right hand with the left. We pick it up from the ground. One tefach. Right, that's what we say. We say in Abdullah. Also, so we lift up the cup of salvation. So that's why you have to lift it up a tefach. When there's an animal, you should look inside a so you shouldn't lose your concentration. You should give some to your you should send some to the spouse. So that the wife should be blessed. Ula Igla Bear of Nachman. Here we have an unbelievable story. Ula came to the house of Rav Nachman Karach, and they had a meal, Berachas Mezayna, Rav Ula benched. Yov Lekasa de Brachot Rav Nachman. He sent the Kosher Bracha to Rav Nachman. Amalei Rav Nachman L'Shadim Arkasa de Brachot Yalta. He said, let's send the Kosher Bracha to Yalta. In other words, take your kosher bracha, let's give one to Yalta. Rabbi Yochanan. So he said, Rabbi Yochanan says, "Ain't pre-bitna shalisha misbarach elam pre-bitna shalish." Why does the woman need a kosher bracha? So that she should have blessing. What's the blessing for the woman? That she should have children, a family. A woman doesn't get blessed with children by herself. She only gets a blessing on the part of her husband. Because it said that the pre-betin of the husband should be blessed. Pre-vitna light never doesn't say the pre-vitna of the woman should be blessed. Pre-vitna. The blessing should be for the man. Prevent no line down mile and prevent nacha. Tanya Nami we have a similar price like this. Rab Nasan ain't prevent no shalish is barak and prevent no shalish. Rab Nasan says, how do you know that prevent of an isha is not misbarach except from the man? Shenamar barak prevent nacha prevent no line mile prevent nacha. So this is a whole conversation between Yalta and who? I'm sorry, between Rav Nachman and Ula, but whether or not they should give the Kosher Bracha, send one to Yalta. Yalta is Rav Nachman's wife. Anahachi Shama Yalta. Yalta heard, she got furious. Come Vizihira, she got up also the Chamra. She went to the wine cellar, Vitavadal made down in the Chamra. She broke 400 cases of wine. That tells you how angry she was. She had a big temper, and she was very upset about this. So Nachman now is like, oh my gosh, his wife's very upset. So he says to Ula, let's send her another cup. Make her happy. So he sent her a cup, right? Like Abitza sent, because like Reb Nachman bugging her, and she made a commotion. She broke all these wine barrels. So Ula sends her a cup, and in the cup he sends a terse message. The message is that the whole barrel is bracha. In other words, you don't need any specific cup. She sends him back a message from peddlers like you, because Ula used to travel between Eretz Yisrael and Bavel. All we get is words. When we spartute from rags, because Ula traveled a lot, didn't have very clean clothing. Calmly, we get like embarrassment. We get new lice. So from you, we get nothing. She's lending it back an embarrassing line. The same way he humiliated her by not sending her kosher bracha, by giving her whole problems, she sends him back a nasty line also. So Amrav Asi, let's finish the Gemara. Al kosher bracha. You're not allowed to talk on the kosher bracha. Amrav Asi, al kosher prani. You don't make a bracha on the kosher pranias. My kosher pranias. What is the kosher pranias that you don't make a bracha on? It's the second cup. Again, this goes back to that Gemara in Pesachim Kuf Yud about zugais, and that's why we're not supposed to have peers, because peers elicit the attention of the shadim, and that's dangerous. If somebody has peers, he shouldn't be making a bracha. Shouldn't make on the cross like I'm talking because he's supposed to be prepared to greet Hashem, and this person's not going to be prepared because he's in big danger because of the fact that he had a peer. Amar Rabavov, Amar Masisa. Rabavov said, and some say the Bryce said, Tanya Eichel Mahachim Mevarach Me'umid, somebody who eats and went on his way, he should make a bracha while he's standing. In other words, if he didn't sit to eat, he should make a benching while he's standing also. If somebody was just standing, not walking, maybe he should make a benching sitting. And when he's leaning, and he's eating while he's leaning, he should sit up and bench. And we paskin b'kul yoshev mevarach. In all the situations, you're supposed to sit and bench. Whether you're walking and eating, you should bench sitting. Whether you're standing and eating, you should bench sitting. Whether you're leaning and sitting and eating, you should sit. You should bench sitting. Just tell you one last line is the Torah when he brings down this Gemara that you're supposed to be giving a kosher bracha to Anshe Beisa. He proves it from the Maisa here of Yalta and Rav Nachman. The question is why? Because the Gemara Bamitzia Peizayin tells us over there that the Malachim sent the kosher bracha they wanted to give. They said, Aye Sarah Ishtacha, to give her the kosher bracha. So why didn't the Torah bring down that Gemara? So I suggest to you the following. There's a Gemara, there's a Maseches Kala. In Maseches Kala we learn that it says over there that a person is, and also there's a Gemara in Kedushin, the Gemara Kedushin not supposed to, it's also a situation over there, right? About Rav Nachman's daughter, right? About talking to a woman and sending a message to a woman. So you're only able to send a kosher bracha if the husband agrees, if the husband says yes, that's okay to do, and maybe that's the reason that the Torah brings it down from here and not from Bava Metzia, because the Maseches Kala says a Meshager Kais L'Isha believe Rishus Baila is Chayiv Misa, and over there by the Malachim they don't need the Rishus of Avram Avinu to do what they want. They're Malachim. So that's why the Torah, when he brings down that you're supposed to be Meshager, the Yesh Oimrim that we said, Yesh Oimrim, that you're Av Meshager, Kosher Brach, Anshe Beisai, the proof of that is not from Sarah, where the Malachim sent it, because the Malachim didn't ask Avram's permission, but rather from here, because Rav Nachman was specifically giving permission. All right?